Jason Rigby here. Super excited today. I have an amazing guest, Mackenzie. This is like, I don't know, you introduced me to another person that we had that was absolutely amazing. I learned a lot from her. And then I was like, you have to be on the show. Once I went on your Instagram and I saw what you did. Can you give our listeners a brief introduction of, a little bit about what you do and how you coach women?
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I'm glad that you had a good time with Carrie. Yeah, so my name is Mackenzie. I'm a coach and I work with women predominantly, very sensitive, very creative women, and help them build up their confidence in a calm, non-nervous system bashing kind of way so that they can pursue the life that they want to live. And whether that is to do with work, like allowing them to have that confidence to go after that. And if that means building a business or finding the right job, or if it's, as we were sort of speaking to prior to recording, if it's on like the relationship front and building up them from within so that they don't go back to that guy who's just trash. Sorry, but honestly,
no, that's perfect.
Yeah.
I love it.
And allowing them to have what they want there, because I believe like one of my deepest beliefs is that, we have our desires for a reason, and like they're part of our blueprint as much as like our personalities are for a reason. And I even believe our looks are for a reason. Like, I think it's this whole package of like where we're meant to go. And so by leaning into that in all aspects of life, your looks, your personality, your dreams, that's what I'm really helping them with, because I just feel too many people just put their dreams aside, and it's sad, and it's not how I think it's supposed to go. So.
Yeah, I love that. And I've got a ton to unpack. I mean, you talked about looks. We're going to get into that. I think that's going to be of a help. I want to, because we're talking about women coaching, I want to let all the men out there know that this is an insight. This is going to help you tremendously. So don't tune out. I don't want 50% of the audience to leave. This is going to be a tremendous blessing for you to understand and know. We're going to talk about creativity, sensitivity, women's intuition, societal norms, and what that looks like. So if you're a self-aware man, then I want you to understand exactly what Mackenzie's saying when she gets into feminine. And we all know, at higher densities, there's oneness. So, gender, whatever, that is all. We're not going to get into that. I don't want to have a discussion on any of that, but I do want to understand you a little bit, Mackenzie, so everybody knows, not that just you're a coach. Have you had like spiritual leanings all your life, or was there a certain age where you began to kind of be like, is this reality, or what's going on? Is this the Matrix?
Yeah, it's such an interesting question, honestly, because when I really think back, like as like a little kid, I was definitely like, my mom says, different, and like would go and like collect magical rocks and like all these things. So I think I always had let's say a proclivity toward, another, like more, that there being more. However, as a kid, I just viewed it as like magic or Harry Potter or like, all that kind of stuff. And, but with respect to like spirituality as we see it, nowadays, yes, there is like a very specific point, and it was, I think 21, like a decade, yeah, pretty much a decade ago. And I think this happens for a lot of people nowadays. We used to talk about like midlife crises, but I think in the world that we live in now, there's very much like quarter life or even pre-quarter life crisis.
Yeah, every decade, you're a different person. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was just, for me, I was like, on this whole track to go down one particular path, which was the fashion industry. It was a fast-paced industry. And I just realized after starting to work for the first time, I was like, oh my God, this is not for me. And that was kind of difficult at the time because I'd really identified in that way. And I was like, wow, if this is not who I am, then who the heck am I? And so I kind of just took that opportunity. I stopped what I was doing, went back to my parents, was totally lost as so many people do. I started taking random part-time jobs, art galleries, all these different, little things that I could piecemeal together. But really during that time, being so lost, the only things I considered, because prior to actually returning to my parents, I was actually living abroad. And so I didn't have that much community. My community had been my workspace, and it wasn't a real fit, which was also part of the difficulty. And they just weren't my people. And so I really sought solace within the yoga communities, even though I wasn't like a yogi, like I wasn't really good at doing any, any of the movements or whatever, but it was more just, this is an accessible community. And I think people living abroad do find their ways, like whether it's through, some form of a meetup. But for me, I've always found yoga studios particularly welcoming, as they tend to be. So through yoga itself, it must have inspired me to sit down, start journaling, start listening. I still don't recall how I landed upon like many spiritual podcasts, but I did. Like at that time, I was looking up yoga or something like that and listening. And this whole like portal started to open up, like first by going to class, and then one time there wasn't a yoga class, but there was a meditation class. And I was like, okay, like let's try this. And holy cow, like you sit in a meditation class for 60 minutes and you're not used to meditating, and all of a sudden you just start like having these downloads and you're like, what is happening? But this is really exciting. Like, so it was kind of that time. It was very pivotal, and yes.
So, this is interesting because at a young age, because we'll get into the creativity side of things, especially with feminine energy, but were you drawn to art? Was your family in art? Because you mentioned fashion, then you mentioned art galleries.
Yeah, well, I actually my mom said, oh, you were the different one. You were she didn't call me the black sheep, but my family was actually pretty much in healthcare. Like my doctors, nurses, dentists is pretty much my family. However, my dad, in spite of he is a dentist, but he's also Italian, and that whole culture is very like, we would drive around and like look at homes, and he would talk about the materials in the home, and like he's very passionate about that kind of stuff. And like I feel like the way he sees the world is maybe through a more artistic kind of lens. So I think that's where it probably came from. And then the rest, nature versus nurture, I wonder how much is just part of my makeup, because I was always very attracted to reading and to writing, even as a kid, like writing little stories about my grandma's dogs. Like I just like the most,
awesome.
Yeah.
So you read as a young age? Because I notice this a lot when I talk, especially with people in the spiritual community, the amount of reading, and so I always encourage parents to have their children, to, make sure you kind of push the books. Some kids don't, aren't into it, but did you read at a very young age? Were you reading like Harry Potter? Were you into like?
Yeah, I definitely was. And that is 100% because of my mom. She's a big reader. And so, yeah, only fiction. I don't know how many little kids are reading nonfiction. So, tons of stories. Yes. Harry Potter. I'm trying to remember the ones that would be so classic. Judy Blume. For people who were born in like the early 90s, I feel like these, especially women, girls, these authors were like such a popular thing at the time. So chapter books, as we called them as a kid, were a big part of my life for sure, especially just,
Were you into like, because you worked at art galleries stuff, and normal, like a normal 20-year-old is not looking at a job for an art gallery. You know what I mean? So I see the fashion industry, be enamored by that, understand the materialism in that arena, and there's beautiful art in all of that.
Yes.
I love watching, even people make fun of me, but I'll watch, like, I just watched the Louis Vuitton, the little commercials that come out, the 10 or 15 second commercials on their YouTube. So to me, fashion or all of these things are a way that we can express ourselves through our higher self. Now we can, misinterpret it in different ways, and make it extremely materialistic. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, I think this desire, especially on the feminine side, this desire for art and creativity, do you feel like with yourself that not just drawn to that as a young age, but in your coaching and the things that you do now, with yoga and Reiki and all these things. Is that the flair for you? Is that where you're at? Is it, mainly, the left side of the brain and all this creativity? Is that where you operate best in?
Yeah, I do believe so. I mean, I am quite organized in all of that, like using the other side of the brain. However, that's sort of necessity, right? I mean, you cannot have a business if you're not structured and
Logical, right?
organized. Yeah. So, but I do think, yeah, the natural proclivities are definitely towards the former that you mentioned there. So yeah, that's just what's natural. It's like if we could operate, if we could be grounded, if we could move through this world being fully in that creative headspace, like I would. But there's trying to.
Yeah, of course you have to. Unfortunately, I have to, and I'm the same way. So opening up an Excel sheet is a living hell for me. Figuring out the math formulas and all that stuff. I'm like, yeah, I'll just have somebody else do this for me.
Right.
But and I get that. Whenever you're approaching, especially, and I kind of want to get into a little bit about your coaching. You talk about live like water.
Yeah.
And on your website, and it's MackenzieBelcastro.com. So I encourage people to look at it. What do you mean when you say, because I can get all these, like Eastern wisdom teachings and stuff like that into the water and all that. And so I start kind of putting a picture together. But what do you mean specifically when it comes to coaching women when you say live like water?
Yeah, and it very much is inspired by probably what you're already thinking about with the Eastern Mythlatsu and all of that. And so, but just to speak to what I mean specifically, it's embracing both sides. And I know we are going to get into this, but yeah, embracing the softer feminine side as well as your strength and your masculine in order to have success, whether that's internal success or external success, but just to really be your most aligned self and to live the best life that you could live. Because again, like so many people either operate in one or the other, and they create struggles in that way for themselves by leaning too much into the creative or too much into the like strong masculine. And it's just about bringing it together and seeing the softness as a strength and then the strong side also as, complement. Like it's not two pieces that you're trying to push together, like they complement each other. So.
Yes. When you said live like water, I'm a water sign, so I was in see like, oh wow, yeah, perfect. I can operate in this. I want to get into another philosophy that you have, and it's an approach that you emphasize: calm confidence.
Yeah.
So whenever I'm thinking of the worst of me, I'm thinking of me not being calm, me being reactive, emotional, and not having a confidence, being fear-based.
Yes.
So, and that's the biggest thing that, as I become, to get in touch with my higher self, it reveals to me over and over again, that most of the things that I'm doing are fear-based. Even in my anger, in my masculine anger, it's fear-based. So when I saw the words calm confidence, that was something that I really thought, could resonate with the audience.
Yeah. I mean, maybe people don't always put that together. Of course, it is seen together sometimes, but if we really do consider like when we're feeling really good and secure and in our bodies and in the right place, we are feeling a sense of calm. Like there could be, I've noticed this, especially lately with myself. It's like, oh my gosh, I could have like the most packed day ever. But if I really feel like, oh, not only do I have this, but it's like, this is where I'm supposed to be. Like the nervous system is not like shooting off in every direction. Like it's calm. And I see that with the people that I coach. It's like, if we can just get them to that place of centeredness, it's not about peacocking. Like that's not actually confidence. Right. So that's where they can actually move and feel empowered to pursue what it is that they desire.
No, I love that. Because it's something that I believe that is critical for all of our lives, especially in the way that we're constantly reacting to everything, whether it's social media and we're getting those dopamine hits constantly, or we're going from task to task to task to task, at work, interruption after interruption. I find it, especially since I've been on social media, even my reading patterns like where I'll be like reading a spiritual book and then I got to check my phone. And then I'll read like a couple pages and I was thinking of something else, so
Same.
yeah,
Yeah.
I've even noticed like, and then I'm like, damn it, Jason, like, can't you pay attention for 2 pages? Like read the chapter and then you can look at your phone, that type of thing. So whenever I think of the word calm, that's so 180 degrees out. I watch these videos, and it could be a Jim, a Karen. It could be, we make fun of Karens and stuff like that. And I watched the lady on the plane, saying she sat next to a lizard reptilian person, and love those memes on that. I'm a big memes guy.
Yeah.
But I look at somebody like that, and you're seeing more and more of this, people freaking out, flipping out, just going crazy. And, and I know with the things that we've had in the past few years, it's taxed people. How do you, those two words, calm and confidence, is like probably one of the most needed things for everyone.
I know.
Nowadays.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I started to notice. I feel like it's one of those things that's very much at like the crux. Like once you can begin to build that, like there's almost a ripple effect. You don't have to try so hard in other things. Like once you build up, essentially your self-esteem and your own like internal worth, you don't necessarily have to try so hard to like, go after and make sure that you do that workout or make sure that you get in that work done. Cause it's just like a part of the way that you view yourself. It's like, it's like part of your self-image. This is who you are. And not only that, it's like, you've got this, like you are sure. And of course, sometimes, when you haven't done that necessarily, maybe you do need to have faith and trust. But then once you've done something that you can be proud of or whatsoever, you can literally pull, I think, on that just one memory and be like, oh yeah, I've done that one thing. And then you begin to build, right? Like, okay, I did that thing and I did it in a headspace that wasn't like, let's do this fast. Like, let's just like, no, like you can do whatever it is you want to do. And as long as you're like seated within yourself, I'm not sure if that's a good image, but it's one that I always use because within myself, I feel like I almost like see like, this might be so weird. I've never said this out loud,
I love
but like,
this. Yeah, this is awesome.
Like a mini me sitting inside myself. Like, it's like,
oh, it's like a Russian doll. Is it like in a lotus position, like a little you?
Kinda.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, that's so funny. I've never, ever, ever said that out loud, but it's totally what I
That's
see.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody kind of has and I think it's so important for people to be open about that. I kind of have more of I go into like a different planet and then I go talk to my higher self in this old church.
Ooh.
So when I meditate, that's what I do. I go like out of, I watch myself, like on a sci-fi movie, pull away from the earth.
Oh,
that's what I meditate. And then I go to a different place. And then there's like this old church with roses and beautiful garden. And then I go into the door and then my higher self always comes off the corner and then comes in and then sits down and then we have conversations on things that are going on. So whether I'm schizophrenic or
no,
it's a spiritual practice, who knows? But
I love that.
Mine's more weird than yours. Yours just seems like kind of halfway normal,
Sure. I'll take it. Sure. No, that's powerful though, to have that place that you can go, can go to, right? And
yeah, it's just separate from everything that's in the world. And, and then I try to, have that conversation with that eternal self. And when it comes to this world of being addicted to drama, being addicted to everything that's opposite of calm. Mm-hmm. And then even, you watch like rom-com movies. Mm-hmm. And the whole premise of it is, the woman she almost has to lose the guy. And then the guy has to, the guy's an asshole. And then, and then from there, then something happens. He gets humble, learns a lesson, and she's waiting, nervous, biting her fingernails. There's no confidence and there's no calmness there. No. And it's almost like, especially on societal norms. And I want to get into this with you.
Yeah.
What does it look like for you whenever you're coaching women, especially when it comes to when you're probably almost like a ram butting up against societal norms?
Right. Yeah. Because society would have you behave a certain way, and as again, like we were sort of speaking to prior, it's a little bit, I feel, for so many women, we do live in a fairly masculine world, like global society. And
Yes.
so there's a lot of women, actually, a lot of women that I see are also very much on the other end of the spectrum. However, I do recognize that a lot are very much conditioned in the masculine. And so, yeah, we do kind of come up against that sometimes, because it's like, oh, but like I need to do this, that, or the other, but they're burning out like in front of my eyes. And it's like, honestly, like that's where they need to have some faith and some trust, or at least someone said this to me the other day, and I thought it was so powerful. And it is what we do in coaching. I realized, I was like, this was so well said. She said, I have my clients like at least borrow my faith. Like if they can't believe in themselves, I let them borrow my faith in them. I'm like, that is a good way to put it, because I think that's what the comfort is in that container. It's like, okay, like, don't worry, like I believe in you, even if you don't
That's so
yet.
good. Yes.
Yeah. And so you almost need to have a little bit of that cushion in order to try to do something different and step away from, doing X, Y, or Z that like the whole world would tell you, whether that's also like to do with like friendship, like, oh, like you need to be, you need to have this amount of friends, or you need to like keep up such and such appearances and like have the big birthday, the big 30th or the big 40th or the big 50th or whatever it is. And then really like come back to yourself and see what it is that you actually want to do. So if you've never done that before, again, I think it does require some element of faith, and then just doing it, like making the decision to actually trust like your internal voice, and
Right.
just do it once and just kind of push yourself a little bit, and then you can build that trust more naturally.
No, I love what you said. I think that's awesome. Like borrowing a faith. It reminds me of like how Jesus was. Like people would come to him doubting, and with whatever it's myths, stories, whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
But I always love, the more I've read the Gospels in the Bible, the more, and I focus on him and what he did. He always like got pointed with people, kind of showed them right where they were at, in a loving way, and then he turned around and showed them who they could actually be. Like he gave them a vision of who they could be. Like, this is you at your best, and you're allowing this. And I was like, that's the perfect coach. Like, and then, they would always be like, well, thank you. Thank you. He's like, no, your faith made you whole, not me. You were healed because your faith. He would always put it back on them that it was their faith.
Yeah.
And it's such a beautiful thing. It's like they borrowed it to get through that process.
Yeah.
But then as the coach becomes to for them to begin to, as they gain spiritual maturity, they begin to see it. And then he kind of just pushed them a little bit over the edge and said, no, look what you've done, and so it's kind of the shift of that maturing, if that makes sense. So that's a beautiful quote. I love that. I'm going to steal that. I'm writing it down.
No. It's been passed around. I can tell from person to person, because it is so powerful. And at the end of the day, it's like, even if you are borrowing faith, like even that act does require your own faith. So yeah, like the coach could step back after and be like, yeah, that was all you, because it was. And if you need that thought or that imagery to support you, then take it. But it is you.
Now, there's another word that I want to use, and that's guilt, especially when it comes to, especially in the corporate world, because as society's set up right now, most men don't watch their children a lot. Most men, they may work 8 hours if they're lucky, 12, 15-hour days, whatever, especially in the corporate world. Now you have dual incomes, and you have women, that have been working, since basically probably, and there'd be numbers that argue with this, but let's say since the 1970s or whatever. And so now, but there's still like these old male patriarchal thought process as about, no, you still need to watch the kids. You still need to keep the home. And so on top of it, I need you to be competitive, in the corporate world too. And so it almost forces in a horrible way, it almost forces a woman to choose. It's like whenever do you see that? Because I know you talk more about a gentle approach, and embracing that. And how do you handle that? And you use the word burnout.
Yeah, it's such a real thing. And something I have realized lately, it's like so much. I don't want this to. I, I do feel like part of burnout, of course, there's like physical realities to it. Like if you're doing too much, and in this case, it very well might be that. But also, I notice that part of it is also like how we're viewing things sometimes. Like if there is this like strong, must do this, must do that. Like I've just noticed our capacity seems to actually be greater when we are. That's why I do kind of take that gentle approach, because it's almost like seems not true, but I've noticed it to be true that when we can actually lower, let's say, the pressure or the standards, we actually kind of tend to do more, which is, it seems like a contradiction, but it does seem to be true. But anyway, as to, when people truly are doing, too much, and when they are truly, truly burnt out, I mean, a lot of that comes back to like if you are in partnership, right? And that's where it's coming from. I honestly feel it's conversation. Like you need to talk to your partner. And if you are alone, you have to have a conversation with yourself about what's realistic. Like what is, what serves you, because you have, like, we should just honestly, like a very practical thing is just like time block your day and like include self-care within that, and then don't try to squish in other things. Like we all think that we can do, like I think many of us are very optimistic about our calendars. Oh yeah, I can fit in this little thing in this 15-minute
Right.
slot, and I can do, and it's like so ridiculous because we also need time to go to the bathroom, or like to like
Right.
go eat something, hopefully without also working at the same time. If you're in that corporate world and you don't have control over that schedule, which many people do not, then I do really think that you need to be honest with yourself about what you can manage back home. And again, if that involves a conversation with whoever you're living with, then I think it's something that you need to do, and stop trying to be so perfect. And that takes inner work. It's not just like, okay, I'm going to stop trying to be, I'm going to stop. I'm going to, it might be hard. And also like you might have accustomed yourself or whoever you're living with that you can take care of the kids or clean the home or whatever, do the dish or whatsoever. But it's like, I mean, I struggle with this because I do like the home a certain way. And yet I am, so I'm trying to work on that myself. Like, okay, how can I just like let it be? And it's hard. It actually is pretty hard. I'm not going to lie. Like for me, I actually find it difficult because
Do you think it's a control thing, or does it give you, in your feminine energy, does the order give you peace?
It's both. I truly feel it's both, because my first thought is a specific place. And again, I come from an Italian background, so I also know that like not everyone has necessarily this view, but within the Italian culture, there's like a saying, like cleanliness is next to godliness, which is a very kind of funny thing. That's how I grew up, in a very clean home. And so it does have an element of, peace. And, and then there's also the psychology behind it. Like when there's order, your mind is more ordered.
Right.
And so I think that's all true. But I've tipped in, I know other people have tipped into that place of like noticing like, oh, I'm too attached to this. It's hard. Why should it be so hard to like sit down and watch a movie or to read a book or whatsoever, like without, like the laundry's not folded, or like there is an element of like a dance between like honoring, I think, what does give you that internal like soothingness, but then also like noticing like, where am I at? Like where are my deep attachments in my, almost like it's in your energy. It's like, are you noticing that? You're like, I keep doing this with my hands.
No, that's perfect. That's perfect. That's a perfect analogy. I think we all face that. I mean, there's like this guilt level of, the other day I was like, I can't watch this movie. It's not practical. Like, in my head, I'm like, it's a total waste of time. There's nothing here. It was an Italian movie with, where it was the priest that had been the exorcist and Russell Crowe plays.
Oh yeah.
It's like based on a true story, even though it was pretty wild. The movie was pretty wild. I think it's kind of a little bit horror. It wasn't that scary though, but it's based on a true story. But I wanted to watch it, because I was in Rome, 2 years ago, and I love going to Italy. So I like the culture. from an outsider. And so I wanted to watch it, and I had waited, and it was like, oh, it's going to be on Netflix. I saw it like a month ago. So I was like, oh, cool. And then I go to sit down and watch it, and I'm like, this is a waste of time. Like, why are you going to, you got this and this hasn't been
Exactly.
done. You need to edit this. You need to do this. You got to finish this project. And whether it's laundry or whatever it may be, dishes.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah.
How do you, like, is this something that you work on? Do you get that specific in your coaching where
Oh,
like,
yeah.
because I've seen this a lot, especially, with women, in the sense of this idea of, and I wouldn't say it's control, but it's this, the home is mine. I need to fix this. I need to do this. I can't handle this. This is too much. I've worked 8 hours. Now I'm taking care of the kids. Now I got to clean the house.
Mhm.
How do
Yeah.
you handle all that? How do you deal with it?
Yeah. So I've found it helpful to read. So there's this one book that I actually recommend to quite a few people, and it's called The Art of Rest.
I'm writing
And
this down.
it's Claudia Hammond who wrote it. And I find it helpful because for people, as you were just describing yourself, so man or woman, it's like, if you have that thought, like, this is not productive, like, I should be doing things that are productive, like rest is not productive, watching this movie is not productive, blah, blah, blah. This book, in my mind, it's sort of that in between step, because you're like, okay, I'm reading this. And so it kind of satisfies that part of the brain that goes like, oh, I'm being productive because I'm learning about this, about how to relax. And it's so funny that we need this, like particularly like I feel like North American culture, and also like Western, probably European culture. We do feel this like guilt, as you were saying, to always kind of be on. So I do feel books, like reading about these kinds of things, are good intermediary steps because they satisfy that while also helping to work with our minds. Like that book, it goes through the benefits of rest and it's very helpful. And she'll talk about why television, isn't the devil, like the good things about TV and like, all of these things that, like, particularly in like the space that you and I are sitting in with like spiritual growth, personal development, all this stuff. It's, a lot of people in this space will talk down about, oh, don't like waste your time watching TV, like when you could read a book. And like, I'm not really, and I don't love that because it's not even about realistic. It's just people, what she actually says, and I find this very interesting, like with, is it TV or movie? I think it's both. They put you in this almost meditative state, right? We almost go into a trance. That's why it is so calming and it is actually so good. It's, don't overdo it, but it's good for your nervous system. It does calm you down. And so on that very, I guess, practical level, like reading books about the topics, I have found to be helpful for people. And then it's, if you want to take it a step further and then like actually truly indulge in like what rest means to you, I think, find what actually truly does give you that pleasure. Again, like not being like, oh, do I need to meditate? Like, is that what it is? Because that's what everyone says it is. Like really considering what does bring you that pleasure and that like peace. Like maybe it's like just like going outside for a walk, or maybe it is watching TV, like just getting clear with yourself about what that is. And then maybe the hard part is actually committing to it. And again, that's where I feel it's like, again, you need to make a choice and you need to like commit to it. And like, that also does build your confidence if you're keeping that promise to yourself of, okay, I'm going to give myself 20 or 5, 20, 30, 1 hour, an hour and a half if it's a movie. I'm going to gift myself that because I deserve it. And I do think that's part of it is as well as like really like considering your worth. Or you could zoom all the way out and be like, at the end of my life, like, I do that a lot with people and with myself, is like, at the end of your life, do you want to be thinking like, I never gave myself the chance to watch this movie? Even if you are going to live again in another lifetime, like in this particular life, do you want to always feel like you always had to be on? And it's just, I think your higher self knows the difference. And I think that's where we get that message come through when we can zoom out. It's almost like we get that opportunity to speak to our higher self or our soul or whatever you identify it as. And most people, they get the message pretty loud and clear. Like, no, like chill, like you're fine, like do whatever it is you want to do for an hour and a half. You're like, you're good. That's, you deserve it.
I love that you use the word gift, like gift yourself rest. I think that's an
Yeah.
amazing statement. I want to talk about this same thing, but you mentioned like blocking out your time. And I've noticed self-worth issues when it comes to giving other people my time, not being proactive, because I believe me blocking out my time is me putting myself first in a good way.
Mhm.
So, because it's my time, and I only have so many years of it. So,
Mhm.
and I'm going to do things that align with my higher self and not do other things,
Mhm.
to the best of my ability. I try. But what does that look like from a woman's standpoint of always trying to please and please other people
Mhm.
and never putting yourself first, but just sacrificing constantly?
Yeah, do you mean, like, how do you stick to your own?
Yeah, because I think it's a because I think I see that it's a problem, especially the way that these societal norms have put upon women, and have them almost like a lesser than,
Yeah.
and then they have to just to get the bar, they're having to work twice as hard and having to do
Yeah.
twice as much just to kind of be on a so-called level playing field that the patriarchal system has built. So it's like, what does that look like, when it comes to healing from self-worth?
Mhm. Yeah, and it can and that it can be a process of taking it a little bit more slowly, like, when especially if I'm working with mothers, like, that is, like, a whole other ballgame, like, if you're
Right, I could imagine.
if you're married, like, that's already something, but if you just have a live-in partner, but, if you have a kid, oh my gosh, like, them stealing, stealing, like, that
No,
shouldn't
I
even
think
be the
that's a great
word.
word because, the stealing's a great word because
Okay.
that's what happens. It's like a thief of time.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what that's I think we use that word because that is sort of how it feels, I guess.
Right.
And I do wish maybe they didn't feel that way, but yeah, taking that 45 minutes even just to be in conversation with myself, or if it's during the week and we're not talking, to go do something like take a bath or to just have that really beautiful time with themselves. Like, there's definitely a lot of times where people come back to me and they're like, yeah, like, I did it once, but it was like, and then I couldn't. And then the kids come, like, it is all about working with your particular situation. Of course, if
Mm.
there is, if you do have a young kid, like, you probably do have to find ways to kind of flow with it and just find your imperfect pockets of time that are like, 15 minutes. I've heard of women just going into a closet because they just want to like
Right, I could
be,
imagine, yeah.
be
The
hidden away.
insanity is so much.
Just going into a closet and meditating, closing your eyes for like 5 minutes or whatnot, just to have your peace. But it can be a process. It can definitely be a process because it's one thing to say, okay, like, commit to just commit. Just commit. And I do think at the end of the day that is kind of what it's about. Like, you do have to, again, make these choices and commit to prioritizing yourself, but it's not probably going to happen overnight. And there probably are going to be things interrupting that. And part of I think the learning is also when things interrupt and your child or your husband or your boyfriend or whatever comes and like taps you on the shoulder, it's like also like learning how to not like tense up and be like, oh, this was my time, and like, like kind of freaking out and just being like,
Right.
okay, like, this is life. Like, I can
Right.
come back, I can find another pocket, or maybe I can also just calmly tell them like, no, like, I need this time right now, like, you can figure it out. Like, just learning how to work with yourself.
Yeah, and I don't want to get into relationship stuff because I kind of want to stay on this, this topic. And I think it's that calm confidence again.
Mm.
It's like when you're put into these situations, is it going to be reactive and egoic, or
Mhm.
is it going to, the higher self knows it's eternal.
Mhm. Mhm.
So it's not looking at time, it's above time and space.
Mhm.
So it has a calm confidence always because it's past, present, and future.
Yeah.
So, looking at that higher self and operating within that, it's so hard because we want to believe in this illusion, We want to believe that I'm the role of mother. I'm the
Right.
role of CEO. I'm the role of wife, and those roles are not real.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, societies, their societal norms, they've built these roles, and these roles come with tremendous baggage
Yeah.
and generational trauma and all kinds of, and the minute that we can eliminate roles, the
Yeah.
minute that we experience freedom, because what would it look like with two loving, caring people with no roles that were raising a child? You wouldn't have 80% of the work being done by the mom, and 20% of the work being done by the other partner. Do you know what I mean?
Oh,
But that's a
yeah.
societal norm. That's a role. Guys get off on this. They don't have to do the work, where
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like, hey, buddy, this is 50-50,
Yeah, like holy cow, just call them out on that too. Like sometimes
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Yes.
in my own life there will be jokes. Oh, but you're so much better at this than I am. I'm like, well, no. No, no, no. I am not. That is the image you want to drop in your mind because it makes it easier for you. Um, I believe in you. That's what I say. I believe in you. You've got this.
I think it's great. But, it's funny to me when I look at the yin and the yang, there's 50%, so there's 50% masculine and 50%. So why would we feel like children need to be raised 80% feminine? What
Wow, true.
you need just as much a masculine energy as you need to create a balanced child.
Yeah.
So the father should be, if you're going to make the commitment to have a child, these things need to be talked about, and spiritual parenting. And I wish I would have done this. I made tons of mistakes, as a child. My kids are older now, but
Mm.
it's wild for me to look back and see how reactive and egoic and just selfish I was as a man, and I would not even think in my head to be like, oh, you need to go to the closet for 15 minutes
Right.
because you're going insane. Even though I can't watch a kid for 2 hours without going insane. Well, let's watch them for 2 weeks. You know what I mean? But you get so selfish in your head. And I think what you were saying is setting these boundaries, putting yourself first, and then having these in calm confidence, which the confidence word here is having these conversations with your partner.
Yeah. Yeah, and that is fundamental, as you said. Like these conversations should be had, earlier on, and you should feel comfortable to have them. And if you don't feel comfortable, then again, just have them, and then you'll find that it's not as scary as maybe your mind's making it out to be, and you can be comfortable because. Again, I really believe that so much of this stuff is choice and what the words we say to ourselves and the narratives that we have in our minds. So write another story and just tell yourself you're the kind of person who is comfortable with that. And I found that that tends to work. So
Yeah, and I never want to be around a person that's operating on fumes. Like the person I want to be around is somebody that's at a 10, if we want to label 1 to 10, but at a 10 emotionally, spiritually, physically, mentally. I want somebody that puts the oxygen mask on first and then helps others, So, if you're operating on fumes, you're doing nothing for no one.
So
You're just
true.
hurting yourself, and then hurt people, So, you're just walking around being reactive, and your ego's just you're going to hurt your kids. You're going to hurt your spouse. You're going to hurt, those at your work because you're not operating, in a calm confidence. That would be the higher self, So I think it's really important that people understand. And this is something I didn't learn till like 5 years ago, how important it is to do self-care, to put
Yeah.
yourself first. It's not selfish. And I think women have a bigger problem than men on this, but it's like putting yourself first, I think, is the number one thing, and
Yeah.
not feeling guilty. Are you Italian? Are you guys Catholic? Do you have Catholic guilt?
Uh, my dad was definitely raised. His brother was born in Italy, so they're more like, let's say, fresh off the boat than
Oh, right.
than I was, like being born in Canada. But yeah, so my dad was very much raised in a more traditional Catholic, yes, upbringing. However, I will say that in my family, I mean, my mom is not. My mom is English, Scottish, all that other stuff. So they were kind of a new unit put together. And so my dad's family religion didn't quite come into it. So thank God. But I did go to a Catholic school, so I'm familiar with
Yeah,
it.
but there's a lot of people that have that underlying guilt of not being able to put themselves first.
Yeah.
And so you just live a life of never being you because you're just sacrificing on fumes. And that's
Yeah.
so sad.
Yeah, it's not sustainable. And I think that's like when you're feeling that way, it's, again, like this is like where like the soft and the strong, like the strong part of me says, like, it's also your responsibility to make that change. You can't just
Right.
be in victim mode being like, oh, like what, like you created this reality or you co-created this reality with whoever you're living with or with source. Like if you're living alone, like you also signed up for this.
Right.
So
That's
it is
true. Yeah.
important to take that responsibility and to make the change because you're powerful enough to make the change, and you're meant to not live in that state of burnout. But yeah.
So the softer side is, and I think in today's society, I always look at evolutionary psychology, back in the day, there was a lot of fears that everyone had.
Mm.
Women were treated horrific
Yeah.
up to 30, 50 years ago, and still even today, in a lot of, cultures.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look back, there was so much trauma that was, on both sides. You would get ate by an animal, you would, there was lots of things, get injured and there was no medical. So you just die early, an infection could take you out. There was so
Mm-hmm.
many different things. And so there's this fear of, just underlying fear that we have that we've created, whether it's, I didn't get my latte right. And, because that's the worst thing that happened to me today. I didn't get chased down by a cheetah, but I did, have my temperature was bad in my coffee, and that's kind of sounds like a joke, but what I'm trying to say is, people don't understand that the worst thing that's ever happened to them is the worst thing that's ever happened to them. And their mind is going to react. That may be a 2 to you, but it could be a 10 to somebody else. So if you were raised in a privileged home, having not having someone do your laundry can be horrific.
Mm-hmm.
And people laugh about that, but and this is what I wanted to get into, how you speak to this, because I think this is so important, this victim mentality. Like, I didn't get my laundry done, or I had this horrific thing happen to me when I was 13 years old. When women are bringing up that victimhood, and the strong side of you, how do you approach that with them so that they have this, calm confidence in this feminine nature that allows them to be able to be creative and not be fearful and victim?
Yeah. And from like, as you were saying, like from the softer side, it is about definitely honoring that, right? Like there are reasons that you're reacting to something, even if it seems quote unquote trivial to other people or even to yourself. You're like, why does this like tick me off so much? I should not be. And I hear that a lot. I should not be like feeling this way, or this is even just fully degrading myself. Like, oh, I'm like, this is crazy, but, or this is so silly, but, or this is stupid, but it's like, well, there's a reason you feel that way. And so from like that curious lens, like taking off the judgment, because that's not really doing anything other than keeping you stuck, is just getting curious about why you feel that way, like how it's feeling in your body. Like, you could look into how it's making you feel, like where those feelings, like what are those feelings trying to tell you? Like, are you feeling like someone stepping over you? Like there is a deeper reason for it, and it's triggering something in your mind that might be like related to, a sad story that you're telling yourself. Like, I'm not, like, nobody sees me. No, like, I'm not worthy. Like my voice doesn't matter. I'm just here to serve people. No one can help me. Like there's probably a very sad and deep story. And these little things like your coffee, like I told them I wanted it this time. Like it sounds silly, but like, I said I wanted this milk and the guy didn't hear me. And now I feel bad. And like, I don't want to be a bitch and like, whatever. And like all this stuff, like get like like take off that top layer and just consider like how you're feeling. And I think that's the exploration that needs to happen in order for you to have that healing, to understand. So the next time you get triggered, you can, you'll get triggered less as well. Like the more you come up against those stories and start to move through them. That's where I would
That's
say,
good. Yeah.
yeah.
And that's part of your coaching. I want to get into, because we're coming up on 50 minutes. So I
Mhm,
want to get
mhm,
into tools and techniques, if
mhm.
you don't mind. Some of the things that, and I know you talk about like journaling, visualization, meditation,
Yeah,
Reiki, some of those things.
yeah.
What are some of the things that you've seen that have really helped women and helped them heal through these processes?
Yeah, the funny thing is, like, I saw this question, like, I knew that this question was coming, and so I was thinking about this because I would want to give, like, one thing, but I was thinking over, like, my, like, list, or the ladies that I work with, and I'm like, gosh, they're all very different, so I do think, we are all different, so some people are more almost like kinesthetic. And I feel for those people, like Reiki, for example, like feeling held in that way and having that like energy healing is the most powerful thing. But then I work with women who are more cerebral, let's say, and they need to move through thought and they connect more to journaling. So I have found that journaling, let's just say, it's talked about a lot. And I think for good reason, because it's very accessible. You don't need a practitioner. You can be with yourself, and it's wild, like how cleansing it feels when you just get this stuff out of your head and onto a page. You don't even have to read it over. And then I always, always, always say to people, if writing so turns you off and you can't do it, like just like voice note yourself or just speak out loud. It's like a form of strange prayer or something, just getting it out and speaking it out. Whatever it is, like just talking to yourself or getting it out on paper. I do like to share that because it's so accessible. You don't need any money to do that. You can really just be with yourself, and you feel like the lightness you feel is like it's felt. It's very much felt, and you have a deeper understanding of yourself after it.
No, I love that. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you this, and you may not have an answer, I don't know. I've talked to several women, and they've talked about, I really don't understand. Um, you know, I want to be feminine, but
Mhm.
the way I see the world and what it's set up, that's not really what I feel like it is, especially from a
Mhm.
spiritual perspective, when you look at divine feminine energy,
Yeah.
and how powerful it is. I mean, it creates worlds, I mean, that's what that chaos creates, I mean, it's the beautiful part. You don't want just the logic, masculine and order,
Yeah.
that's scales and all that stuff. You don't want that. When you're doing these coaching sessions, what do you think is the most common misconception that women have about feminine energy, or like what they feel like they should be?
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good question. Yeah, honestly, there is a misconception that you have to be frolicking in the fields, right? And you have to be wearing these like milkmaid kind of dresses, and
Right.
it's so funny to me, but that is a lot of the imagery that's seen, and it's beautiful, if it's for you. Like there is a very like hippie aesthetic that is very much seen
Right. Yeah. The
online
flowers in the hair. Yeah.
for women. And a lot of women that I work with, they live in big cities like New York, Toronto, where I'm from. Like, actually, most of them live in big cities, London, and it's so, that's not what they're going. That's not what they want, but they do want the softness. So it's really about, okay, that's also, you don't need to fit yourself into that box. It's actually what I believe is that energy is actually just coming back to you, like your intuition. So it's actually not about fitting yourself into the stereotypical box, because that's just another box that could be just as rigid as, trying to put on a suit every day and go into the office. Like you don't need to be baking pies every Sunday, and
Right.
you know.
Right. I think it's like, coming from a masculine side of things, when I was unconscious, I was, you're naturally drawn towards someone that is super feminine but powerful. Like I think every man is drawn towards that, whether it's the Carl Jung, the mother thing, or whatever it may be. But and I think that there's a way that maybe the suit is a protective suit. And you said this in the beginning, and I know we're coming up on the hour, so I know we've got to go. But you said something about looks,
Mhm.
and as when I was unconscious, that's the thing that a male goes for right off the bat,
Right.
like how a woman looks. And I can remember a story I had. I was in the Marine Corps, and a captain that was a nurse. She was a nurse and just very attractive. I was in my 20s. She was in her
Mhm.
40s. So she was like the older woman, super beautiful.
Yeah.
I had a Marine Corps outfit on, but looked amazing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And she told me, she goes, I played this role of being the cutesy Marine, being ultra feminine. And all the colonels at the time, she was like a lieutenant, and all the colonels and the higher up men loved it, and she would like give her power to them. And she
Wow.
made rank really quick up to captain. And then she stayed at captain, that middle rank, in the Marine Corps,
Yeah.
and never made it to colonel or anything, because she told me, and I thought this was, I'll always remember it. She said, Jason, I ended up staying at this level because they could never see me,
Mhm.
as a leader, or never could see me. I just have always stayed kind of the good looking cutesy
Hmm.
woman, like if you're talking to someone that may be, because I know that attractiveness can be a curse and a
Yeah.
blessing. I mean,
Right.
it gets you into job interviews easy. It allows you lots of opportunities. You don't have to work as hard.
Mm.
They've done scientific studies on that.
Yeah.
But it also could be a curse too, because every type of interaction that you're dealing, especially with males, is there's an underlying thing there.
Yeah.
There's a sexual attraction there. So when you're talking to these women, especially like in these powerful women in cities,
Yeah.
that putting on that fearful suit and then being in touch with your looks and who you are, and loving doing, working out and doing yoga and looking your best and being the
Yeah.
best. How do you talk to them about that?
Yeah, it is interesting because yeah, and it can be very real, as you're saying. There can be these, whether they're overt comments or whether there's like just this energy that's uncomfortable. And I've even seen this with people that I'm not working with, like my little brother's girlfriend, like just like hearing stuff from her, and I'm like, oh my gosh. But at the end of the day, I really do say, like, don't let that shrink you, because it's putting you into a bit of a fear space. Like, it's putting you into, oh, like, am I safe? Like, you probably are, like, truly safe. Like, obviously, if you're not safe and you're picking up on some unsafe energy, like, get out of there. But, if you're having that fear come over you, like, oh, like, whatever story it is, like, oh, this person's just talking to me because of this, or like, try not to get so wrapped up in that story and just sit in your own power, and almost like you can either disregard it or use it to your advantage, like whether you want to. And I don't mean in a weird way, but I just mean like just feeling like you are looking professional, if that's how you want to look, or you're feeling put together, and just using that to enhance your own confidence within yourself. Like, there's so many incredible, like very deep stylists out there nowadays who I find
Right.
so interesting to listen to. And they speak about this all the time. Like, the clothes you wear have an effect on your mood. And so just like sinking into that, almost like as you're like these like suits, but almost like a superwoman suit. Like, like these can be like totems that just remind you of the kind of person you want to be. So whether that is empowered, or whether that is, whatever it is that you want to be in the workforce or in your personal life, just almost embracing, I guess what I'm trying to say, embracing how
Who
it
you
is
are.
that, yeah, who you are.
Like I always talk, and I've had this too. It's like I can't unbutton my blouse. I
Right.
don't want to have too many buttons show, because then my boss is going to get this from a male perspective. And I can't talk to all males, but depending on conscious level, of course.
Mhm.
Most males think that they have a chance with a woman
Mhm.
because they're so egoic. So they're
Mhm.
going to play around and be flirty if someone is out of their league, but it's paying them attention at work or whatever.
Right.
So the number one thing you can do is make a clear boundary right off the bat without being, assholish about it. So
Yeah.
and I know that's fearful and that's horrible to say something like that, but there's a way where you could, because most men want clarity and they'll know a boundary.
Yeah.
Like if somebody's like, if you're just being nice and flirting with this person because they're
Yeah.
flirting back and you're worried about your job, and I know that and I can't understand that.
Yeah.
I never leave my house fearful.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like I don't look and watch my car keys and look around.
Mhm.
I live in a totally different world than a woman does.
Yeah.
You guys are like have buttons on your phones to call 911 when you're walking in a scary place, and you
Yeah.
can't walk downtown. I don't think that any of that,
Yeah. Yeah.
just kick their ass. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not. So
True.
so
Yeah.
I don't understand this, and this could be extremely uncomfortable. That's why I'm asking you. Have you had issues where women have had to deal with these, unwarranted relationships or the shrinking? You mentioned the word like having to shrink down.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, a little bit. Thankfully, what I will say, we do live in such a digital age now. So, of course, there's emotional scarring because sometimes things stick with you. But yeah, I've had women tell me things like they were like crazy stuff, like from big companies, be like, yeah, like this guy I was supposed to have a meeting, his superior just like came into the meeting without his shirt on. It's like, well, 1 second, I'm changing because they were working from home. I was like, that's mad. But what I like truly, like if something's very uncomfortable, like thank God we're on the computer. Like you can actually just exit out of the meeting
Right,
nowadays. And
right.
if you're in real life, I God would hope that would not happen. But trying to remain again like within your own power and just knowing that you can take control. You don't need to play into any weird dynamics that make you uncomfortable, like always trusting your intuition, like this is off, like you're not overthinking it. And even if maybe somebody didn't intend something and whatever, just still it doesn't matter. Just trust yourself and and like change the situation, get out of that situation. If you need to tell someone, tell someone, but you're not subjugated, you're not a victim. You don't need to be in any weird situation to like allow your job to flourish. I mean, I don't know if you've spent time in Los Angeles, but I've spent a little bit of time there and around actors, and oh my god, I mean, we know about this now, but like that whole world is,
Yeah, 100%, right.
oh, women feel they need to do certain things to get to a certain place. And it's just not true. Like that's also a story that like society's been telling us, we've been telling ourselves, like it's not true. It's not true. And remembering that you're in your own power, like stop, just like,
Yeah, it's almost like you have to wear this fearful protective suit, and then at the same time, you have to always be watching that you're not giving your power away.
yeah.
That's a really scary place to live.
Yeah. I mean, I
I would
guess
be
it
extremely
is.
stressed out. Like,
Yeah,
I would
it
I would
can
be
be
freaking out all the
challenging.
time.
I think it can be challenging, yeah. But if you are in that state where you're freaking out all the time, like that's if and it's a work environment, like that's probably not the work environment for you because you're not meant to live in that state. Like it's very unhealthy, of course, to live in that state. And then if it's inner work you need to do, like you might know the difference. But if you're walking into a specific setting and there's like all this stuff going on, like I do think you should probably find a way to get out of that because
Right.
it's not, you don't need to live in that state. There's plenty of incredible, whether it's work environments or friend environments, if it's coming
Mhm.
at you in a more personal way, like you don't need to hang out with that group of guys even if like they're funny and you've known them since university. Like you don't need
Right,
to be
right,
friends with
exactly,
those
yeah.
those people.
Yeah, it's almost like this wanting to be liked, and that's the fearful egoic thing, from both sides, on this. I even hate saying sides, but whatever.
Yeah,
That's what we're
yeah,
talking about,
yeah,
because that's the roles that we play
yeah,
in society. I wanna ask you one last question, and then, we'll get, going so I can give you some time, not take all your time. This has been very interesting. I love
yes.
this.
So,
What are, whenever you look at, all the advice that you've given, the coaching that you've given to women, what's one piece of advice or wisdom from the conversations that you have that you can share with us?
hmm. I would really say to this is something that I think I've already shared. Yes, I've already shared, but it seems to be it's a very deep belief of mine, and I we really need to trust in those imaginings, those dreams, those visions that come to our mind, like not disregarding them as silly or unrealistic. Like if you have a specific dream that comes to your mind, whether that's in a meditation class or whether that's while you're out walking, like actually take a moment to like take stock of that because it's signaling to you something, and it's going to lead you in a beautiful direction if you can just trust and take a step towards that. And whether that's in a professional sense or in a personal sense, I really believe they're there for a reason, and you really are intended to listen to that. So trusting in that is, to me, like the most important thing. It's such a clear, or maybe it's not clear, but it's a great step in like that blueprint of your life. And yeah.
Do you think it's like symbols, or do you think it's the sleeping state in our subconscious? What especially when it comes to a woman, what should they be paying attention to? Like you said, during meditation or whatever it may be, while you're driving a car and you kind of lose thought. What are the things that what's that magic that they should be paying attention to?
Yeah, it could be like an energetic state. Let's say if they like if they're seeing themselves living very very peacefully, or whether they see themselves like in a particular location, like you spoke about with the church. And I mean, that might not be the location you want to live in, but some people see themselves like they get visions of, being on a beach or being on a farm, and then they live in a big city. Like it could be visual things, or it could be more of an energetic state, or it could be seeing themselves even in a more specific way. Like I've had people talk about, I see myself on a stage. Like, I don't know what that means. I'm not really comfortable speaking, but maybe there's something there. Just, it could be a visual, it could be auditory, or it could just be a feeling. But just allowing that to come up and just like kind of having fun with it, like exploring, like, what could that mean? Right. Like or even just a thought, like oftentimes it's a thought. It's like, I feel like I want to be creating something in this area. I'm very attracted to this. This is really inspiring. And just giving yourself time, whether it's once a week or if it's more often, and just creating time to explore, like, what could that mean? Almost like making like, those like brainstorming bubbles, and just really kind of having like a creative time with that, and it can be really fun.
Yeah, I love that. And it's like with relationships and stuff like that too. It's like, does this serve me? Because I always tell everyone, well, just get a divorce, be done. Like, why are you in the relationship? Like, next, move on. You've evolved past this. It's not, why are you suffering in this? It's like, it's so simple when you look at either they're evolving with you or spiritually growing with you, or they're not. And you need to have that conversation. If you can't have that conversation, and they're not willing to have it, then you need to politely go to the country, and go have fun in Italy, and be single and have a ton of fun, and take that time, there's a movie on that, Eat, Pray, Love, or whatever, where it's just like, go, Thelma and Louise, if you want, whatever, just go, So I think it's so important. And I love what you're saying there is to take that internal wisdom.
Yes.
Sadhguru always says that. He goes, the book's inside of you. Like, you don't need to be reading all these other books and doing everything else. You need to pay attention to that Bible that's in you, and it has all the answers. And that's the cool part. And that's what you're saying, is to tap into the wisdom. So if anybody wants to listen to your podcast or go on your website, what's the best way or they want to do coaching session with you? What's the best way to reach out to you?
I think the easiest tab, which I'm sure many people say, is just through Instagram, because it's kind of everything's linked up through there. So yeah, just visiting me over there at Mac Belcastro. So, and then I think I have a very great feeling that Jason will be on the podcast. So if they want to wait, if he says yes, then they can wait and listen to the episode with you, which will be coming up. I'm just putting that out there right now.
I love that. Yeah. It'd be great. Yeah. I think, but for me, it's like whenever you look at somebody and their life work that they've chosen to do and the passion that they chose to do, and then they're running in this direction of evolving and moving. The reason I want to have this podcast, even for me, it's kind of uncomfortable because I don't want to come off like dickish or come off like I'm a male, so it's really, really tough. But I wanted to have this conversation because I know my heart's right, so yes. I wanted to be able to have this conversation, and the words that were said, some of them may not be exactly perfect, in this society nowadays. Everybody's judging every little word that you say. I know, especially where you're at in the maple leaf.
It's wild.
It's wild, and it's so crazy because, we're all evolving. We're all learning. The person I was 10 years ago is 180 degrees out. And
Ooh.
the beautiful part, and Mackenzie, I know you can agree with this, even our cells change, what, every 7 or 9 years? So
Yeah,
I'm not, I'm
oh,
totally a totally different person, like a whole different person.
genuinely, yes,
Like
down
every
to your
cell is
yeah,
totally different. So
so
what the thing I tweeted when I was 18 is totally that really wasn't me. Like biologically, it wasn't me either. So I think it's funny with all that.
yeah,
But Mackenzie, I really appreciate you. I appreciate your energy and the way that you've chosen to give your life and help to those that are hurting and need. This is so much needed. The calm confidence. I mean that's amazing. And if that right there is what the world needs, especially
oh,
now. And you're giving that gift to the world. So I appreciate you and love and light to you. And I want everyone to know that they can go to, you also have a website, but I want them
yes,
to go to the podcast because it's the North Star, right?
yeah, it is.
So I saw it on Spotify. So
Yes.
I went on there. So everybody right now, type in the North Star and subscribe to the podcast. I know that would be awesome. But thank you, Mackenzie. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Jason, and you're very articulate, I will say, so your words were great.
Oh, okay. Awesome. Well, thank you. Appreciate it.